bow your heads. I am not Kazite, I'm Linda Rodenkamp, but Debbie asked me to get into her place here, and I found this prayer online. If you're interested, it's Powerful Christian Prayer for Quilters. I modified it a little bit, but I thought it was kind of appropriate for the day. Bow your heads. Heavenly Father, today I want to pray on behalf of all the quilters of the world. May these petitions cover all the talented brothers and sisters who create unique works of art. We come with a heart full of gratitude for the talent and resources you have blessed us with to create these quilts. Your word says in Exodus 35:35, He has filled them with skill to do all kinds of work, as engravers, designers, embroiderers, and as makers of every kind of craft. We praise you, Lord, for creating us with creativity and the skill to work with our hands in this way. Lord, I ask for your protection over our hands, eyes, and the machines we use as we enjoy this hobby. May our hands work skillfully and without harm. Our eyes see clearly the beauty of the fabric and the intricacies of the patterns, and our machines run smoothly without fault. Lord, you know the quilters around the world who will be losing their ability to continue their craft. We pray you touch these artists with your healing power. As we piece together fabric, remind us, O God, how you have sewn together the fabric of the universe, creating something beautiful out of nothing. Just as each piece of fabric has its place in a quilt, remind us that you have a purpose for every creature and every element of your creation. In this time of quilting, we dedicate each stitch as a prayer for our family, friends, our country, and those in need around the world. Let this activity not just be a hobby, but a dedicated time of intercession where our thoughts and prayers are woven into the fabric of each quilt, bringing warmth, comfort, and hope to all who are covered by it. We ask Jesus to care over all the individuals who use and view these quilts. Guide us, Lord, in the design of each quilt, so it may tell a story that is perfect for its recipient, reflecting your love and the uniqueness of their life. May these quilts be an anointing over them, serving as a prayer, covering in the years to come, protecting, comforting, and reminding them of your eternal presence. We pray quilters everywhere feel the power of the Holy Spirit as they quietly create their heirlooms. Lord, use these quilts as future opportunities to share the gospel, allowing each thread to be a testimony of your grace and love. May the works of our hands through these quilts be pleasing to you, O God, as we seek to glorify your name in all that we do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Linda. I don't know if it's appropriate to clap after a poem, after a prayer, but let's go ahead and give Linda a round of applause for the dedicated poem. And it's a nice way to introduce the quilter, the featured quilter of our program this year, Nyla Hefner. Now, if you know Nyla, raise your hand. She's looking down from heaven today on this quilt turn, and I'd like Carrie Kufo and Lindsay Barnes to come up and talk to you about Nyla's quilt display over here. Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. I guess the first thing I would say is my mom loved to sew.
Talk louder.
That better?
Yeah.
The first thing I would say is that my mom loved to sew. She would sometimes say, I like to sew more than I like to cook or clean. But she was good at everything. But sewing was her passion. And someone, made a comment that she did all of these. And I said, yes, but this is only a handful of what she did. She made lots of quilts for family. I asked her one time if she ever thought of selling her quilts, and she said that she would not. She said she couldn't put a price on a quilt. So.
We brought her very first quilt, which is this one. She gave it to me. I don't know when she started to make these, but she did do this, I think, before she got married. She didn't tell me that. And then we think this one is an early one as well. So these are the two oldest of them. And then after that, my mom said that she started quilting after her mom died. And she started making quilts for all of her nieces and nephews that didn't get a quilt in great grandma Hilda after she had passed away. So they all got quilts, and then I think she just started making them. I don't know that I ever remember being at a house where there wasn't a quilt. Either she was like sewing the pieces together, or the big the big thing was out either in her like dining room or in the basement, and she was just sewing away. It's funny because my mom and I were talking about quilts, and my mom likes these quilts, and I like the ones with the white on the background more. So I don't know what all of them are called. I do know that one time I asked her to make me a double wedding ring quilt, and she said no. and I don't know that she said no, like ever, but she did tell me she doesn't sew in curved lines. But my mom is making me one now.
We'll say I'm going to try. She really liked sewing with the Ladies' Aid too. And they made lots of piece quilts like this out of that polyester type material. And then they would tie them, I think, and then she would help with the backs on, and she made tons of those with the Ladies' Aid. And this is one that she made with Lindsay's son, Jenner. She did one with Elliot and one with Jenner, her two oldest grandchildren, or great-grandchildren, sorry. And so you can tell that he did a lot of the sewing, because it doesn't match up exactly like hers always did, but he sleeps with this under his pillow. Calls it his green quilt, so yeah. And just, I wanted to say a little bit about this one. This is the very last one that she did, and this is the only one up here that's not hand quilted, because she had started it, she had all of the blocks laid out like puzzle pieces, and so they were stacked, and she had several of them sewn together. So I finished it. At least she had the pattern for me, and I could kind of look at it and figure it out. So I finished it, and we were one block short when we were putting it together. And I think we spent, I don't know, an hour trying to make another block that would kind of match the rest of it. I'm like, how did she do this? And I think she just had an eye for putting things together. And like I said, this is not hand quilted because I do not do that. I had a lady quilt this one for me. But so that one's pretty special since it's the last one that she started. And then she made all of my kids' baby quilts. She liked to try different things. So we brought a variety, like she did applique, which in my mind, I feel like this would take years, but she did applique quilts, she did a couple of stamp quilts, she did a picture quilt. It has one row for each of my kids, and then a family row at the bottom, and just really neat.
I don't remember how she got the pictures on there or where she like went to go get them put on, but I think she made a couple of picture quilts. I don't remember what the other one was.
I do know that she spent a lot of time, she actually went to, because some of these are professional photography pictures, and she went to the photography place to get the paper signed, the copyright paper, so that she could have them stamped on here. She used a special material for that and had them stamped on and then pulled them together. So, and embroidery, this is the bedtime prayer quilt, the Now I Lay Me, with the embroidery pictures and then quilted. Baby quilts was one thing that she did give away, like baby showers and things. They generally weren't as involved as these quilts, but she would piece together and then quilt some baby quilts that she gave away.
I think that it's fun, like when I can tell, like, my mom picked all the material out for this one. So like, it matches, and I think you might have picked this one out too. My mom likes purple, if we can't tell. This one, she had on her bed in her bedroom. So I think she liked these colors. She had pillows that were this color, curtains that were kind of like this. Oh, she made all of us a K-State club. Like some of my brothers, I think maybe Mitchell's has the stamp on it, but mine is embroidered like this. Some of them say like K-State on them.
With the scraps.
Yeah. She like never wasted anything, which I'm sure you guys don't either. But now that my mom has all those scraps from all the things, the quilt that she's making me now has little bits and pieces of each of kind of all of these quilts, which is kind of fun that this new quilt has all of the old quilts in it. So this quilt is my son Beckham's. So it was maybe one of the last quilts she made too. And it has felt in it and regular material. And so she like mixed materials and things too, which I thought was fun. Yeah, she did. We found later as we were cleaning everything out that she had a whole bunch of quilts, and she had like marked names for each of them, and then like a quilt for like Megan's baby or Erica's baby or my brothers and sisters that hadn't had kids yet. So she had like pre-made quilts for all of them too. So I don't know. We thought she's probably made like 100 quilts. She's a crazy lady.
I think that's pretty much everything.
Does anybody have any questions?
I want to thank Carrie and Lucy for bringing in Naya's quilts. I know this is just a small sampling of all of the quilts that she had made throughout her life. I know that how many of you have worked with a church group that makes quilts for the grain train? I know my Aunt Vera used to always piece for the grain train, and they had to have made hundreds of those. A very, very worthwhile cause. A little side note is Nyla was our oldest son's babysitter. So we go back a ways on, and I don't know how many hundreds of kids she babysat. They also had foster children. So Nyla and Ernie had a great impact upon not just Wheaton, but all over Kansas. So let's give them a big round of applause. And now if our quilt turners could make their way to the stage, we'll start viewing our quilts. I might mention that the restrooms are out in the lobby area to your right. Feel free to get up and stretch as we start turning our quilts. And if any of you finished your icebreaker, you can hold that up and I'll pick those up, or Adley will pick that up. Thank you. Okay, as you see your quilt starting to be picked up, please come up and be ready to show that quilt. We have lots of quilts today, and we probably don't want to still be here at midnight. Although, I can guarantee you're going to have some awesome stories.
Okay,
So this is a quilt that I purchased at Ashland. For those of you that know me, you know I don't do quilting. People say when you get old you'll try it, and I don't think so. But I love quilts, and I greatly admire them. This one, I'm guessing it was done by machine, but the story behind it is we did a Tupperware benefit for the families in Ashland that lost their homes. And so in the process of that, we went out there and met people. We delivered the products. Long story, I'll cut that down, but they invited everybody who helped out to come back later for an appreciation party. And they had these quilts for sale at the appreciation party. Now what had happened was people had donated hundreds of quilts. And so the community, the people who had lost their home, took the quilts that they wanted, and then they turned the rest of them back into the community. They were sold, and that money went, I assume, back to the families. I forget now how that all worked. But they had quilts of every size, every shape, and every design. I think this fabric looks old, and so that's the reason I bought it. It reminded me of a lady that I knew that quilted when I was young that we used to go and see. But that was the story behind it. The backing of it, I think, even looks old as well. So anyway, this is actually a Civil War design. And oh, by the way, this is the book that I wrote after the fires in Southwest Kansas. And I can pass this around, Debbie, if you want me to. It's got some information about the fire in front of it. Oh, I'm Rosie Bossy. So anyway, it's got some information about the fire in front of it, and I wrote this after I went out there and met the people, but then a lot of the stuff that I put in here actually happened. So it was kind of a God thing. But anyway, I'm going to lay that down. This is a Civil War quilt. This one is actually called General Order 11. And this one, General Order 11, took place in September of 1863. The sacking of Lawrence took place in August of 1863. And after Lawrence was sacked by Quantrill's raiders, General Ewing put forth General Order 11, which designated 4 counties on the border of Kansas and Missouri to be evacuated. And that's actually where we heard about that last year at the quilt turning, and that's where my novel on the Civil War is starting. But I have learned so much about that order. One of the things that was said was that people in Lawrence were just killed willy-nilly. That wasn't true. They had a list of men's names, and they went in there with a specific list. Now, whether that was right or not, okay, that could be debated, but they were not just killed willy-nilly. There were no women that were harmed that day. But that gave General Ewing enough clout to go ahead and order the evacuation of those 4 counties. The people that lived in those areas were told that if they could prove their allegiance, they could apply for the ability to stay. And they were supposed to be given 15 days. That didn't happen. There was no way they could prove that because those families were so disrupted. You know, they might have a son fighting for the Confederates and a husband fighting for the union anyway, so I'll quit.
Thank you, Rosie. Rosie actually brought in a book for a door prize, but by the time she got it here, you all had put your tickets in the sack. So I came up with the idea that we would pull one name out of the LA fire victims quilt drawing, and they would get this book that is written in honor and memory of the Ashland fires. And the name drawn out is Jean Wagner. So Jean, if you would hold up your hand, I'll bring it to you while the next quilter talks.
I'm Dee Groff. I'm from Havensville. This little quilt, I had this package of 5-inch squares and I didn't know what to do with them. So I sewed it together and I wanted to keep it kind of wild, so I added the border, and then the back is an actual panel. So it's two-sided, I guess.
I thought maybe two of yours right together.
Maybe we did.
Hold on. Wanda, what did it look like? Just okay, we'll keep going. Just go. All right. I don't know who that is. Debbie is. Now, you might say this name wrong.
Hi, I'm Wendy Rogers, and this quilt was made by my mom, Linda. She didn't want to talk. So, a couple years ago, Mom and Dad sold the farm as it is and moved to town. And she put all of her unfinished projects in a big, Rubbermaid tub. And once they got into their new their house, she'd reach into the tub and pull out a project unfinished. And this is one of the ones that she pulled out. This is a hand-tied. She just, went in, pulled out a grocery sack, and this was what was in it. And pieces and parts and things were cut. And this is, like I said, this is hand-tied. We did this one. This is brilliant. That's not good.
Just this 2001.
Yes. This, probably within the last 10 years it was started, and it was probably finished in the last 2. And this is another one of the unfinished project bins. She was doing unfinished projects, and she'd reach in and she'd pull out like a quilted purse. And so she'd do a quilted purse, and then she'd reach in and pull out another quilt. I think this is a Joann's quilt. This started its life as a Joann's quilt, but you can't, once they're done with those patterns, they don't find them again. And so this is all we had. This is machine quilted by Karen Gosbach at Silver Lake, back in her little she shed. And like I said, this is an old Joann's fabric patterns. This was probably another one started in the last 15 years, and it just got done.
This is a quilt that I brought that I did not make, but the Peacemakers of Womego made for me. If you're a peacemaker, hold up your hand if you're part of that group. They presented me this quilt after our daughter-in-law passed away, and it sits on my chair. It's very, very special, which I think shows that our quilts have many, many purposes in life, and they're here to bring comfort. And I wanted to recognize the peacemakers of the Womego Church for the work that they do and the comfort that they can bring. This is my granddaughter's quilt. She's homesick today. I had her brother 2 days at our house sick, so tomorrow is my turn. She made this quilt for the fair. She's 13. How many of you have taken a granddaughter to buy fabric? It is an adventure. And I would never have ever picked out these 3 pieces of fabric to put together into a quilt. And she found the design online, and you have to kind of look for it. Her brother walked in one day and looked at it and he says, well, Viv, that's really nice, but there's no pattern to anything. Which didn't set well with her, because there is a pattern if you look for it. And it turned out beautiful, didn't it? With 3 fabrics that I would never have ever, as a grandma, have chosen to do.
Anita Leonard.
Oh, Anita? Oh,
That's okay. Sorry, we're just walking the door. We're late. Yeah, we came from Topeka. This is called My Father's Ties. Oh, sorry. My kids wouldn't believe that you couldn't hear me because I'm pretty loud. Yeah, that's fine. Anyway, it's called My Father's Ties. And the pattern actually showed using fabric, but I used real ties. Because I like to go to sales and garage sales, and I would pick up ties as I went along. Anyway, I could make 2 blocks out of each tie, and I used I try to use fabric that would look like men's pants to go with it. And anyway, I've got the template if anybody's interested in doing it. But there's one template, and you just turn corner to corner to make that entire block. And I mean, it was a fun quilt to make, actually. So
the squares are made out of ties too?
No, the squares are no. That's just plaid fabric. Oh, and then the back, I had an estate sale. I actually found 7 yards of that tie fabric. Yes, fabric. There was an estate sale that my friend Jenny and I went to, and I swear, there was fabric from floor to ceiling in her basement. It was just loaded, and they had 3 days of trying to get rid of fabric. Anyway, and this one is mine too. I'm going to show that later. Oh, later. Come on.
I happened to notice on Nita's quilt that she has a really nice label in the corner on the back. We talked about that one time. May will show you that label. If you're not labeling your quilts, you need to do so. And if you have quilts that are vintage that have a story, but they're not labeled, think about getting a label for that. Thank you.
I am Nancy Hubbard, and I make Quilts of Valor through the Wamego Quilt of Valor Guild, and the information is back there by that one. But I go to Pinterest, and I go, oh, that's a neat idea, and I don't buy patterns. I take graph paper. The one I saw had squares of leaves and zigzag with the leaf colors. And I went, I can make squares with stars and do the zigzag. Now, the hard part, Y seams. I did not, because I did not want a seam in the white where I hand quilt the stars. This had to be a Y seam. And don't look close, because some of them aren't right. But an old veteran who will get this in March or April will never know. The other thing I wanted to learn to do was yo-yos. These are yo-yos. And I saw on Pinterest this square. So I dug out scraps and appliqued the Dresden plates down. The yo-yos, when you Pinterest how to do them, no two instructions agree. And I did not like the big holes in the middle. So I kept looking and Googling and trying to find how to make smaller holes, but not a really good idea. And then I just bought this to go with the gray. I hand quilted all of it, including the Dresden plates. And so I don't know who will get this. Somebody.
I volunteer.
Okay, Rosie.
Nancy has another quilt of Valor on display on the other side, so you might take a look at that during our break time.
And visit with me.
And visit with Nancy if you would like a little more information on how to join your group and become a part of that.
I'm Joan Colderman, and my daughter made this quilt. A lot of these are family handkerchiefs. The two in the corners above were handkerchiefs that I carried to school before the days of Kleenex when I went to Duluth to school. So it means a lot to me. Some of them, like I say, are family hands. The one with the butterfly on the corner was part of the handkerchief. It was my aunt's. So.
And the butterfly's crochet.
Yes, yes it is.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
It's tied, it's not quilted.
It's got the butterfly backing. It has butterflies on it.
It has butterflies on the back, which is my favorite, and purple.
I'm Darlene Niehaus. I live in Havensville. I make quilt. What's that? Oh, I forgot my tool. I made this. When anytime my kids get married, I make them a quilt. Even though this isn't my son, this is what I consider my third son, Josh Mapes. When he got married, I had to work on it. Every time he showed up, I had to hide it. Each one of them, I mean, I've got many, many hours in this quilt. I think they got married 2 or 3 years ago. Might have been longer than that, but I made that for them, and my oldest one, he forgot to bring it home. I made him an Amazon star, and it's a paper piece. There's many hours, many cussing over this one. But I got and I'm one that I'm going to use a pattern, and I got the plate to make it up to Missouri Star.
Where are you
Darlene, show that tool.
I did it. I did it. No, I did it.
Oh, you hit it? Oh.
With me still working, I don't have time to go on Facebook or Pinterest or any of that, so I got to cheat. I got to have someone tell me. Each one of them, I had to turn it 8 times every time I sewed it. So each one of them took a long time to do, and it's just something that, it's something as a memory for them. I always told them I wasn't going to give it to them until they had a get together, because they went to the courthouse and got married. Well, they never did. I broke down and gave it to them anyway. So while I'm up here, I'm going to sneak real quick. I did make this baby blanket for my great niece. She's almost 2 years old. When she shows up at my house, she'll get it.
How many of you have quilts like that too? When they show up, then they can have it.
Hi, my name is Angel, not Buse, and I'm actually the granddaughter for Dorothy Wegner, if anybody remembers her. Or my mom is Pat Knott, and my aunt is May Wegner, wherever she ran off to. Oh, is she? Oh, okay. So I belong to an online Facebook group that a lady in Topeka does machine quilting, and she does all kinds of fun things for everybody who's part of it. It's called Peggy's Quilting, and Peggy Torrens is the one who does that. So in July, she does a contest. You have to, sorry, my granddaughter's, it's her first quilt turning. She's not quite sure about it yet. I'll teach her. So anyway, she does an online group, and she posts our quilts, and so she does a contest in July. It's called Christmas in July. She gives everybody opportunity to win a panel. So the center part, is actually a panel, and so I won the panel. And then you have a short period of time to design your quilt, have it done by a certain day, and then your name gets put into a drawing to have it quilted for free. And so I designed all of this on my own, and I did it in 2 weeks. You can see I did the chimney, like the blocks to look like chimneys, to mirror the chimney. These are pinwheels going through here in 2 different shades of blue to help give it dimension for that sky look to it. I carried all the colors in that quilt going around, and if you ever look at it closely, you'll notice I matched up all of those blocks to go, and I'm gonna, just like you said earlier, I did a lot of colorful metaphors. And I tore it out many times. I did not win the drawing. But she did give me 10% off on my quilting. And so that's this particular quilt that I made.
What a beautiful Christmas quilt, wasn't that?
My name is Jennifer Whiff. I grew up in Oldsburg. My mom is Martha Turner, my sister Laura Turner. They work at Blue Valley Electric and Building Supply. I now live out in Dodge City, Kansas. I'm a veterinarian. This is my stress relief. I started quilting after I moved out to Dodge and joined a group of ladies who just took me under their wing, and kind of, I knew nobody out there, so they were kind of my new family. This is a challenge block of the month for Miss Kitty's Quilters. It was started in 2009, and I actually picked the fabric out from Ben Franklin's fabric store that used to be there in Manhattan. And I love the plaid, and then picked the rest of the fabric to go with it. But I did not finish this quilt until, I gotta look at the back. I did label it.
It's over there.
Yeah, kind of looking. 2020. This is paper piecing, and the hard part, I always call it, that's quilting by number instead of paint by number, but I couldn't figure out what I wanted to go where. That's why it took so long. And then it was machine quilted by Joyce Muhlenbrook, who now owns Birds of a Feather Quilt Store in Dodge City.
They want to see the back.
I say the back doesn't show the quilting very good because it's
It doesn't show.
it's a paisley, but it's I love it. So. And then this quilt was I was given some fabric from my husband's grandmother, And she was quilting, and so she had she had gathered the fabric but never made anything. And I did hand embroidery of the geese and the flowers, and it's just the simple package. Yeah, see the back.
Oh, there's a hummingbird.
The quilting has a bird, a hummingbird, and flowers. It's not the same bird as on the fabric, but I picked it because it carried the bird on through. And on the top, I loved how she had the hummingbird on the flower along the top band. But then the block is a corn and bean variation, and the baskets are one style, and the piece border is the other style. And when I first learned of that pattern, I think I have made 6 out of the 8 different variations in different projects, but kind of my first experiment into hand embroidery. And I like to match my fabric with, or my quilts with my fabric choice, so I matched the first quilt.
Your clothes with your fabric.
Yes.
Very cool.
Now, Jennifer came from Dodge City today. Is anybody else further away today than Dodge City? Because we have a small door prize for the person that came the furthest. So Jennifer, I think you're the furthest. I wasn't sure if you'd have a carload full of people, so you have some candy to share if you want to. Let's give her a round of applause for sharing with us in those magnificent quilts. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Deanna Fairbanks. This is my husband's Aunt Sadie, sorry. Aunt Sadie Fairbanks, or she's a Martin, quilt. Does anybody know what pattern this is? Because I do not. No? Okay. It's all hand pieced. And each one of these is an individual thing. And then on the back, she sewed them all together. So it's all done completely and totally by hand. So, and when she passed away, I ended up with it. And this, yeah, you think? And then this is, it's her aunt too. This is my sister-in-law. So this is her aunt.
With like paper piecing. And so it's an octagon and they fold over each edge to, yeah. I actually have a pattern for all of that, yeah.
And what year, Deanna, was that approximately?
I'm guessing in the, I don't know. I mean, it's a little bit more modern fabric, so I would say in the 90s, 80s, 90s probably.
Is that a new quilt design for many of you to see? When we have break, you can come up and look at the small area that we have folded out for you. Look at some of these quilts and maybe ask questions of the quilter.
We can't figure out which is the Martha will tell us. Which is the front, which is the back.
I'm looking at the stitches, and I think this must be the tie.
With an Afghan, there's not a front or back. With an Afghan, there's not a front or back. I don't quilt, but I do crochet. I made this when my girls were little, so it's 40-some years old. It's been washed many, many times. It's just some cheap knitting worsted yarn that I picked up at a dime store type of thing. So I made that for my in-laws when they had a farmhouse and it was always cold there. So.
Is this one your son's? That one is for, yeah. Ron's getting tired.
And the one that I partially made grandma finished. And the one I partially made and grandma finished for me. She was cutting it me the whole entire time. Grandma doesn't.
I'm Laura Turner, and I also do not quilt, but I do crochet. And when I was visiting my grandparents, sometime I think I was in either high school or early college, I saw on TV how to do the broomsticking technique, which is this part. And so then I made this for my grandma while I was there. Wow. At least I got a good start on it. I don't remember if I finished it while I was there, but that's that one.
How many of you have seen broomsticking before? Okay, a few. Okay.
While we're on crocheting, I'm going to show off my sweater here real quick. It's not a quilt and it's not a blanket, but it's heavy enough to be one. So I just always have to find something different to do because, yeah, that's just the way it is. This is called color pooling, and it's done with variegated yarn. And if you can see, the back has a triangular pattern, but then each arm and sleeve has a slightly different pattern on it. So I color pooled differently on all three panels of it, and then sewed it together and came up with a stitch. So I thought, well, it's as heavy as the blanket.
Beautiful. That concludes our first bed of quilts to turn. While we get ready to start the second bed, a couple years ago we gave out color catchers. Now, how many of you have used color catchers? Okay, is there anybody in here who has no clue what I'm talking about? Well, good, because at the break time, you that have no clue can have a color catcher. A color catcher is a little sheet that you buy from, I think, Carbonite or something I bought. You can get them at Walmart. And you just throw them in with your fabric, with your laundry, and it catches all the dye that bleeds off of whatever you're washing. For quilts, it's a godsend. I washed my Christmas quilt recently, which is greens and yellow, greens and reds, and I threw in 4 color catchers, and they all turned out purple. But my quilt had no bleeding on it at all. So if you're not familiar with color catchers, please come up and get one of these out of the packet so that you can begin using a color catcher. Thank you.
Do we want to move this thing bed over here now so that it can hang down easier?
Hi, I'm Jane McNee from Topeka. This is a fan quilt that my mother made, and it's a machine piece, but all hand quilted. She was a member of a church quilting group for many, many years, and they would all sit at a big table and hand quilt, and they would charge by the spool, and I'm sure it was ridiculously inexpensive for all the hours that they put in. But I was looking at the stitches this morning, and I counted like at least 9 stitches per inch, and I don't know, I think that's pretty good. I'm a wannabe hand quilter, but I got a long ways to go. And this is also a quilt made by my grandmother for my husband and I for our wedding. As I was putting it, getting it ready to go, I thought it looks pretty dingy, but it is well used. I need to soak it and I need to do some repairs, but this is all hand pieced and hand quilted, and I counted, there's over 2,300 little blocks in here. And she was, I think, a master at putting these together. And what's fun about these quilts is a lot of these fabrics are from clothing that my mom or that I made for myself back in the day, many years ago. So. And I wish someone had told those generations to label their quilts, but they didn't. So I don't know exactly, well, I know what year that was made, but I don't know the year that my mom made.
What years were you married?
Well, 50 years ago. So I know this one. I know how old this one is.
All right.
You know, my fingers just ache thinking about that quilt over there. How many of the rest of you, your fingers are just aching at the thought of all that hand sewing and hand quilting? Right. What a dedication. Whose quilt is this? Oh, Amber's coming.
So my grandma is 91. Is that right, Grandma? I think she'll be 92 this summer. So my grandma's Lavona Biesenthal. I'm Amber Magnet. Grew up, as many of you guys grew up watching Grandma crochet, quilt, hand piece, all of that. So this is one of the items that we brought today. So the grandma, she made this when they first got married. They got married in 52, 50. So 75 years, yeah, in the 50s. So this is like 70 years old. So hand quilted. I just grabbed this morning, just so I'm not even for sure anything too much about it. But obviously, 70-year-old quilt, you didn't do a whole lot of machine anything back then. So that's a.
This is the double ring.
I think that's the wedding ring one. So this is the wedding ring one. So she's made several of these. She's like Nyla. She's quilted. Like I said, oops, sorry. So, anyways, so she's quilted. She's always has quilts going on. Even still to this day, she's actually working on another one right now. So, so this is one that she made for me when I was a baby. So. A few of you guys know how old I am, but so this is about 45 years old. So she did hand quilt this one. Obviously, all of our quilts that us kids have received, they're very much loved, very well used. So don't look too closely at it. But obviously, this is sitting in my cedar chest still today. So my kids even have some quilts that Grandma has just pieced together. I was telling one of the ladies earlier that she just quilted, just blocked some pieces together, had it on the couch. And my youngest, who's 18, he's decided, when my grandpa passed away, he's like, Grandma, I want that quilt. So Grandma says, okay, you can have it. So for the last 5 or so years, he has had that quilt on his bed every single night. So that quilt is very, very well used. But when he was little, I'd stop by, pick him up from a day at Grandma and Grandpa's, and he was covered up in that quilt every day. So that quilt has been loved from him for 18, 16, 17, 18 years. So yeah, so we have a lot of memories like that. So we very much appreciate those, Grandma.
I would like Lavona to stand up. Can someone help her stand up?
They want you to stand up.
I know she's a die-hard quilter. Now, she's got
92 years old.
92. We may have another lady in the audience that is 92. Or 3, maybe. If you're 90 and over, hold up your hand. Wow, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you for coming.
Hello, my name's Lois Bossi Schlegel. This is a quilt that was part of my mother's collection of quilts. And there was a tag on it. You know, never found out too much about it. And there was a tag on it that says it's a double Irish chain. This quilt top was pieced by Stella McKenzie. She donated it to the Ladies' Aid, and they finished it, and they sold it for $100. So I'm thinking my folks went to a church function and bought a quilt. So if anybody knows anything, it was Vern McKenzie's mother, Helen McKenzie's grandma. If anybody knows, if there's any Ladies' Aid participants here.
Well, if it was Vern McKenzie's mother, it could have been quilted at Buck's Grove.
Okay. That's what I'm trying to find out, some history about these about this quilt because I knew nothing about it. So, you know, so it was just part of Mom's collection of quilts, and I ended up with it. So it probably was Bucksboro. Okay, that's wonderful. All righty.
Just a couple comments on that. We run all these garage sales here to raise money for the Historical Society, and every once in a while we have something come in like that, and you think, why? And I know some of you've gone to estate sales and you wonder why, but they're out. They are going out there, and sadly, if no one wanted that, where would it have gone? It would have gone to the landfill. So even though there's quilts out there, if you're a quilt lover, even though you don't know the history of it, they're worth saving. They're part of our heritage. And museums will take that heritage if you don't know what else to do with it. And just like Lois found a tidbit today by showing that quilt, sometimes the tidbits come and we have the story in the end. So I encourage you to cherish, kind of like the prayer, cherish these works of art.
This was made by my mother-in-law, Delta Martin. Delta Martin was a whole lot like the other older ladies we've talked about, quilted continually, moving furniture out of her room to set up the quilt frame and stuff. And this is one, and I'm not exactly sure how I inherited this one. We have a whole bunch of her quilts. She didn't do a whole lot of the stamped cross-stitch ones, but this one was a little different, so I thought this year I'd bring one that was also embroidered by her. I also have the baby one that she embroidered, and she did machine, I can't even speak, sew them together, but she hand quilted everything that she did. So all of it is hand quilted. Like I say, I have a son that's the youngest in the family, and I think like Lindsay was saying, her grandmother had made some for all of the kids. Well, Joey came around late in life. So when Kenny passed away, Joey sort of snatched up all of his quilts that he had. So that may have came from Joey's pile. He may have grabbed that one.
I'm Janet Finney, and I'm from Manhattan, and this is a quilt that my mom made. Mom never considered herself a real talented quilter, and she did a lot of just utility quilts to make. And she used the fabric she had, and you know, back in the 60s and 70s, we all sewed our clothes out of double knit. So she had lots of double knit. And so she did a lot of just squares, but I thought it was amazing that she did this fan quilt out of the double knits. And I know she cut them all out with the scissors. She didn't have the rotary cutter back then, and she tied it. And so I know a lot of quilters think, oh, double knit quilts, but this one's always been special to me because I can look at it and see all my clothes that my sister and I had. Yes, yes, and they're very warm. I had one double knit when my son went to college in Wisconsin, and he was home over Christmas, and I sent it back with him because it was way below zero, and I knew if he had car trouble, he would be warm. So.
How many of you have worked with double knit? There's several of us are in a group called Crafting for Others, and we have inherited tubs of double knit that we're going to attempt to turn into quilts for the orphan grain train. They will never wear out, for sure. And as we work on them, we think of when we wore clothes that looked like that. And we had one the other day that looked like a tessellation of green and yellow, and why we would wear that stuff, I'm not sure, but we did, and thought we were pretty fancy. This quilt I brought is my husband's Uncle Fritz, Francis Burgess's. We just recently inherited that from one of my cousins, Eugene's cousins. And Fritz, this quilt is like 70 years old. However, he never used it. It went in a cedar chest, and then when the estate was divided up, he was not married. It went into another cedar chest, and this cedar chest family is downsizing, so we ended up with it. But Grandma Burgess, Effie Burgess, made only one pattern that I know of when she quilted, and it was this pattern. Now, she might use some different colors. Yeah. The one I'm holding up there is my husband's quilt that Effie made for him when he was 12 years old. Now, how many of you have 12-year-old sons or grandsons? How many of you think they would be really excited to get a quilt for their 12th birthday? But the green one, before the cousins brought that quilt to my husband, did have it appraised at an appraisal shop in Kansas City. And if any of you would like a copy of what all they looked at, they picked that thing apart, stitch by stitch. Now, how many of you have had a quilt appraised? If you're interested in a copy, just to see what they would do, I have several copies up here, and you can have a copy of that. So anyhow.
Did they give you a price then?
If we were to, yes, the appraisal value was $850. So don't discount the cost of our quilts. This quilt is one that I finished several years ago. Linda Tessendorf was cleaning out all of her fabrics, and she graciously allowed the Crafting for Others to come in and take what we wanted. Now, someone mentioned the estate sale where they got all that fabric one time. How many of you have been to estate sales and fallen into a fortune of fabric really cheap? Well, Crafting for Others fell into a fortune with Linda's collection of fabrics, and one of the things that I picked up was these blocks. She had stacks and stacks of these blocks. Now, I think probably Linda's mother made the blocks, and I can't think of her name now, but Mary Tessendorf made the blocks. So I sewed all the blocks together, and then had Dee Groff do the quilting for me. But the back side, I think it's this one, yeah, was a huge tablecloth that came into our garage sale. So the back of it is a tablecloth. So that's the story on that particular quilt.
Yeah, that'll be it.
That's part of it. I've sat on we used to church.
Okay, so this is a crocheted Afghan that my grandmother, Vivian Bish, so my mother's mother, she was a lady. She didn't do quilting, but you never saw her sitting in a chair without her crochet in her hands. And I don't know how many hundreds of quilts, but this is something she designed herself and put together. And then she lived in Wichita. She entered it in, I think it was some sort of art competition. It wasn't a fair, but some sort of competition, and she won first place with it. So she was always really proud of this. And when she passed away, I got it. So.
Very good. Okay, I'm Janet Finney, and this is one. My mom did lots of handwork. She worked when we moved to Manhattan, she worked one full-time job and one part-time job. So I'm always impressed by how much handwork, because she made all of our grandkids, all the grandkids, baby blocks and baby quilts, and she hand quilted those. But when my sister and I were in high school, we each got to pick out what color Mom, and this was, she bought it it was like 3 pieces. It wasn't the regular blocks that you normally got. And so Mom cross-stitched all did all that and then sewed it together. And then she had it hand quilted, and I think there was a Mrs. McCormick in Blaine years ago who did lots of hand quilting. And I kept it in the cedar chest for years, and so it has some yellowing. And I haven't had the nerve to do something about to wash it in something to see if I could get some of the yellowing out. But I now, when I was pulling out my quilts, I had them folded up in pillowcases, and so I decided that I have a spare bed in the bedroom, and you talked about Mom didn't label any of her quilts. So I pulled out all the quilts I had from Mom, and I'm laying them on this bed in the basement. And so I took pictures of each quilt. And so I'm going to print the pictures off, and I'm keeping pictures, and I have a journal of all the quilts I make. So I'm going to put the pictures in the journal and talk about all the quilts that Mom made and about when she made them and what happened, so that there's a history of those quilts that Mom has. That's an idea for somebody. Yeah.
How many of you have taken pictures of each of the quilts that you have made throughout?
I think this is
good. Is this yours, Janet?
No.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Jeff will start out.
I'm Angel again. And this here quilt was actually made by my grandmother, Dorothy Wegner, back in the early 1970s. It was made for my mother and my father, and so it's extra big. They had a queen bed, but my grandmother made it extra big because my mom was like, I want it to be able to go over us and not expose us. So, so it was made extra big, and now it sits on my king size bed just fine. But originally, my grandmother, they didn't have the rotary quilting, so all of it was hand cut out and then sewn, yeah. And then she actually, she did hand stitching for the quilting. So it was originally hand stitched, and then my dad got hold of it and wrapped up in it, and it broke all the stitching out of it. And it ended up wadded up into a tub in a corner of their closet for years. And then when my mom had to come live with me in her last year of life, she bribed me to finish it, redo it for her, and she bought me a sewing machine. So I've got a jazz too. Love it. And I re-quilted it on that machine. And then when my mother was passing away, we were able to put the quilt on her in her last moments of life, and then it moved to me.
Yeah, and someday I'll get it.
She will. Now, I don't know if on the quilts it's the same, but I know when I do wash my crochet stuff, I use vinegar. And so I did it with the one I brought at Delta's because it has all yellow spots on it. So I just put some vinegar in with the wash and let it just set for 20 minutes or so. And it was amazing how many of the yellow spots came out. So I'm not advertising that, I'm just saying that's something I have done. They say vinegar won't affect the fabric and stuff. I don't know. That's just what I've read. So it did work on my.
Any thoughts on that? For some of you that have done that? She mentioned washing the quilts. They're on one of the door prizes over there. There is a bottle of quilt soap, along with a box of color catchers. The quilt soap that is over there is very concentrated, and I understand it's used when 4-H'ers want to wash their sheep for the fair. And that's supposed to be really good. At this time, I would like to introduce Adley. And she's probably in the kitchen. We'll have to get Adley out here. While I'm doing that, if you are a person who is here for the first time, raise your hand. Oh dear. The first timers have a very special pincushion made by Dee Groff to inspire you to either quilt or become involved with fabric arts. So here is Adley, Miss Potawatomi 2024.
Hello everybody, good afternoon. Thank you all so much for coming. I've never been to a quiltering before. I didn't really know what it was before I got here. I actually had to Google it. So this is a first for me. I think it is such a great thing, seeing like one thing brings so many women together in one room. Like this is just such an empowering thing, and I'm so glad to see like history is like still making its way through our lives, and it's with us all the time. And like this is just such a great thing. I'm so blessed to be a part of this today. Thank you, Debbie, for inviting me to come up. This is awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You know, it is neat to see all the way from a baby of about 3 months, 2 months, 2 months, all the way up into our 90s. What a blessing to be able to bring those generations together. Once again, if you finished your icebreaker sheet, you can give those to Adley. And our ticket ladies will be back at the LA Fire quilt area and extra tickets for the door prizes. And you will, while you're taking a break, your glasses will be filled with punch. Don't drink that punch yet, okay? Let the punch sit there till we come back from break. So we'll take about a 15-minute break for you to stretch and view the quilts and find the quilt makers and ask questions.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kansas. Happy birthday to you.
And then take your glass of punch and toast each other in Kansas. You're Kansas. Yay!
I have a favorite poem that I always read every year for Kansas Day. So while you're toasting, pretty soon, how many have been here all 4 years? Okay, you might end up memorizing this poem then. It's called The Kansan. Whenever you meet a Kansan, I care not where it may be, under the pines of the forest, out on the waves of the sea. Whenever you speak of Kansas, his or her eyes with a brighter glow, for every Kansan loves the land where the sunflowers grow. So one more toast to the state of Kansas. And with that, I'll have Jolene Cervantes come up and talk about, well, let her talk to you first, and then I'll say something more.
They were in Christmas. Yes, they've been married 2 years. They're thinking about She works for Midland. That's Jim Gray's I can't. That's a little bit little. Yeah, it's a little bit smaller. Imagine that purple. Oh, I heard that. Cool.
And may it be your attention.
She was 27.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about, there were 2 needlecraft clubs. Can everybody hear me now?
Okay, my name is Jolene Teskey Cervantes, and I'm going to talk a little about an introduction to 2 needlecraft clubs that were in Onaga. And this tablecloth was done by one of them called the Needlecraft Club. And this is one my mother belonged to, Lenora Teskey. I'm going to pass, start passing this around. The Historical Society is lucky to have the records of the Needlecraft Club and the Art Needle Club, both in this area. The Art Needle Club started in 1910 in the city of Onaga and was here to about 1983. And the other club, the Needlecraft Club, started in 1940 to about 1996. Probably many of you in this room had mothers, grandmothers, relatives that were in these 2 clubs. Now, all of the records are at the Historical Society. Mary Lee ensured that they were all kept together, and these women kept immaculate records. They have records of their meetings, of who was a member, of the things they were working on. And so we're in the process of going through all of these records, trying to capture the best way we can of so much information, so it is really something that we can display or feature at the Historical Society. This tablecloth was done by my mother. She kept records. She said it was done in 1990. So I go to the records of the Needlecraft Club, and it shows there that they worked on the tablecloth for my mother in 1990. So I know these women worked on this tablecloth. So this is just in the early stages, and what we're trying to do is, if you have anything that you know were done by these 2 clubs, to try to maybe see if we could get something in the museum to feature. Now, they did more than quilting. They did embroidery. They cut rags for rugs. They did all types of activities. So at the front, there is a summary of these clubs that was done in the, what I call the blue book, the History of Onaga book, on page 108. Now, there were some extra copies in front. This is in the Facebook page that does summarize these clubs to some extent. So this is just an introduction to these clubs, and you'll probably see more as we work on this project. But again, this was one of them that I know the women worked on with my mother. Lenora Teskey. That club was really, the Art Needle was in the Onaga area, and the Needlecraft Club was really women that were south of Onaga. And there were, I can pick out people in here who probably had family members in that club. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now, Jolene, stay here a minute. Jeannie Wagner and Lisa, would you come up, please? You know, you have to believe that somebody above us is looking over things. Because last night at 9:15, I got this phone call. And I'll just let it go ahead. And I want you to stay here. One of the displays in our museum, once we get the Heritage Center put together, will be the needlecraft area that will feature quilts, crochet, a lot of tatting, knitting, embroidery.
Jolene, look right here.
That's my mother's name, Lenora Teskey.
And now if we can display a little more. In the middle it has the Friendship Club and the date. Needlecraft Club, okay.
This is November 6, 1947. And Debbie asked me how my mother-in-law, Marie Wagner, got a hold of it. I wish I knew. So maybe the records will tell.
Yeah, that was the very 1947. Is that the year?
Yes. Yes.
That's really the year they started, I think, by my records. But yeah, they started in 1947. Can everybody? So there, I could go to the records because they would have. They met this month at somebody's house and they worked on this project. So probably if we can match this and know exactly when they worked on it. But this would be members that were in that club, yes.
I can tell you how your mother-in-law got it, because her sister-in-law was Delta Hodge.
Yes.
Who was the president of the club at the time.
She was a founding member. It really, they started in her house, the first meeting. Well, the first meeting met in Delta's house per the record. Delta Wagner Hodge is the first time they met at her house to form this club in 1947. Matches with that. Could be one of the first projects they worked on and put their names on it. Yes.
Well, and friendship quilts were often.
That's my Here's my mother.
Yeah, your mother.
Geneva Wagner.
Yes, so my mother-in-law had 4 sister-in-laws and a couple cousins on there. And one name we never have figured out, Gladys Wagner. Who in the world was her? I mean, was she? He wondered if maybe it was supposed to be Gladys Winters. Whoever did these signatures made teeny tiny little stitches. And they did all the signatures and they're nice and black. And you can really see them. Well, I had asked my mother-in-law about some of the quilts. I think I had seen this once. And she mentioned how each lady had to make a flower. And sometimes each lady made a whole square and then they were put together. So I figure this must have been done before 47. And that was maybe the first one they had finished. My husband remembers seeing some of those quilting rods laid out. He said that it was somehow done so the ladies came on both sides and started working in the middle. Now, I'm pretty illiterate when it comes to quilts. I may have a master's degree as a reading specialist, but I don't know quilts.
I think they had, well, probably all you quilters know, they had it and then they rolled the quilt.
Yes.
So they could get to the center. They would roll from the sides.
Well, and once my mother-in-law came to our house looking for her quilting rods, we couldn't find them. She wondered if Ron had put them in the chicken house for the chickens. Well, I got to thinking he was a Boy Scout leader. I think maybe they went to tents. But my mother-in-law, Marie, went on to make a lot more quilts. And in the 1990s, when she... Bring it down. Okay, in the 1990s, she decided she'd make a quilt for 3 granddaughters. She asked me for some scraps of material, knowing I had made a lot of garments. Well, everything I had made was a polyester blend or a knit. And she said, oh, no, it's got to be 100% cotton. But if I had any flannel sheets, she would take those to use for the quilt batting. And she made these quilts and finished them by the time she was 90. Well, a few days short of her 91st birthday, she died. I called my daughters. Lori was in Florida, the first one we called. Right away, she grabbed the quilt off of her bed and wrapped it around her. The next girl, Lisa, lived in Manhattan. Called her. She went to her cedar chest and got out a quilt and wrapped it around her. Well, when we had the funeral, a 3rd granddaughter came up, and Lori said, Marie wants to give this quilt to you. and Cindy took the quilt and wrapped it around her. I think all three young women knew that these quilts have been made with love. Thank you.
Isn't that a beautiful story? And I know you didn't all hear it in the back, but I wanted that to be a surprise for you, Jillian.
It just happened last night.
Just happened last night.
I didn't even know about it till last night that you were going to speak about it. Well,
I think Jeannie or her daughters, one of them saw it posted on Facebook, and through Facebook then made that connection and made the connection to come today. So let's give them a round of applause. And,
the hostesses always served refreshments, and I'm not sure if they were more tea-like or more luncheon-like, but Marie almost always served cream chicken on biscuits, and she was asked to serve that over and over.
I think the records do show that they did socialize and have teas, and probably didn't wear blue jeans and tennis shoes to their teas. So that is a neat addition to our story. And with that, we'll continue on with our quilt turnings. Anita Leonard. Okay, here she comes. One of our tide quilts we brought down from the museum up there is wool fabrics and things, and in talking with Rosie about Civil War quilts, she felt that our quilt is probably from the Civil War era.
Hi, I don't think I told people I'm from Topeka. This was made by my grandmother, Herdwich Martins. She went by Hattie. She had 12 children. They had absolutely no money, and she had 8 boys. And so I'm thinking this was probably made in the 1940s, because during the war, 5 of those boys signed up and left for the service. Were gone for like 3 years. 6th one went to sign up and they wouldn't take him. They said 5 from one family was enough. But anyway, I'm thinking these are the boys' pants and their jackets, all hand done. Whenever we had company, my sister and I had to give up our bedroom and sleep on the floor, and Mom would put this quilt over us. And I remember being like 4 years old and thinking, I can't roll over. This thing is so heavy. Any idea what they would have used for batting? Because that sucker is heavy.
Another wool blanket. They put blankets inside.
I don't know. It's thick. It's really thick, and it's all. I mean, it's even the back and the front are hand whipped. So everything's done by hand. So
My mom used it.
anyway, thank you.
How many of you have a quilt like that is just really heavy, and you got to think about rolling over?
Hello, my name is Frida Hartman Gales, and I'm Jim Otwell's fiance, and this quilt is very special to me because I call it my Vietnam quilt. My oldest daughter, when she was born, she was a week old when my husband left for Vietnam, and my mother-in-law, she thought we needed a project while he was gone to keep me busy. And I had never quilted before. So she got me started with this. She helped me do the first row, and I had to do all the rest. It was crazy. We got together, I drove from Palmer up to Topeka once a week, and we spent time on this blanket. So it's very special.
This phone was left in the restroom, so you might check and see if it's yours. You know, I look at this quilt, and as she comes up to talk about it, when I tie a quilt, we're not going to go quite that close together. And some people tell me I tie too close, but this is really tied nicely.
Yeah, they tied it about an inch apart on each, like a checkerboard. The problem with it is she picked a fabric that is raveling, and I'm talking not in the mic.
To this day.
It was made, we believe, by my husband's grandmother or mother-in-law. We found it in the house when we cleaned it out after his folks had passed away. And I think it's early 1940s, or the fabric is a little older than that in the quilt itself, but guessing from the backing, I think that's about when they made it. But she didn't use it much because that one fabric ripped out, raveled out, so it was pretty much stored for all that time.
How many of you have quilts at home stored in a cedar chest? You know, I decided I would get out the quilts and use them in the house because my grandkids will never want those if they've never seen them. And perhaps that's why we see so many at estate sales, is that they don't have any connection to anybody that used that quilt. And simply to say it's great-great-grandma's quilt, they may not have a clue who that is. And so I've started using the quilts at home. And I have one grandson that loves to jump on the bed yet. And they're not clean all the time, but I decided it was better to use those, and if they wear out, they wear out, than to keep them tucked away where no one can appreciate the story that goes with them. Which reminds me, look at the tablecloths some of you have. There's some embroidery on some tablecloths, there's some applique on some tablecloths, some are just vintage tablecloths, but they're being used to bring back some memories. So as we finish up the day, you might just peruse the tablecloths a little bit.
This quilt goes back many years.
Joan, say your name too.
I'm sorry. I'm Joan Colderman, Keel Colderman, because my grandmother's name is on this quilt too. It was made for my husband Gary's great-grandmother by St. Paul's Lutheran Ladies' Aid in 1914. She was the first president of the Ladies' Aid at Duluth in 1913. And so at the end of her term, they made this quilt and gave it to her. And it's traveled from here to California and back, 2 places in California and back. And Gary's aunt ended up with it. And so she called and she said, I'm mailing that back to you since you're the ones that live back there yet. And we decided the best place for it was in the museum because there's names from Duluth and Wheaton and Onaga, and back then they traveled a long ways to go to church that far back. So I think that's about all I have to say about it, but like I said, we felt the museum was the best place where descendants of all of the ladies on there, because it's 110 years old. 110 years old.
They will after we get these done.
Our museum will feature our quilts. We're not to the point of putting them out yet, or into a new display, trying to figure out the best way to make available the quilts. We do have a book where we've recorded the names on each of our friendship quilts. So if you came in and you wanted to see Grandma Kufal's name, we should be able to go to that quilt and tell you where that would be at on the block and the connection of all the other names to that name on that quilt. So.
I'm Gretchen Cope, and this quilt was made by my mother back in 1933. Keep me right. Well, I say 1933. That's the earliest date I find on it. I also find 1938 on there. So they obviously had a quilting club in Hutchinson at that time. And my mom and my aunt, and I knew several of the ladies that were their friends, who are all passed now, so I can't really get any more. I unfortunately had to buy it at an estate sale, but that's okay. I got it. It belongs to my daughter Michelle now.
How many of you have been in that situation where you've gone to your own family's estate sale and have to buy something from the estate that you really want to stay in your family? I wish, working with the museum, I would encourage you, if you have things that are museum worthy, of telling a story, not just for us to store it, but of telling a story and adding to our story of our local history, that you consider donating that to the museum, or if you're in another town or from another county, donating it to the local museum. So often we go to estate sales and there's things that could add to our story, and they're being purchased for $1, $2, maybe even going into the trash at the end of the sale. So think about that. And think about adding to your own area's local history.
Darlene Niehaus again. This is one that I think my great-grandmother, I'm not 100% sure. My mom wrote a note and I need to have it put on there. She just wrote that this quilt was made for Jessie Bottom Thompson in 1922 when Mom was 13 years old. And it's amazing for the year that was made, that has never been stored away. Mom might have had it put in the cedar chest for a little bit, but before she passed, she brought it up and told me it was mine because she wanted it to stay in the family. And I will tell you, my boys love quilts. They may not use them a lot, but there is 2 quilts back there. One was made by my mom's mom, and that was made for me. We had to have someone else do it. And then we have one back there that my dad's mom made for my mom back in 1968, and she embroidered it. But when Mom passed away, we took all Mom's quilts, gave each one of the grandchildren a quilt so they know where they came from.
Isn't it amazing how things can survive? I hope that our current day things that we make survive as well.
These are quilts that my mother's dad's mother made, clear back in the early or late 1800s. My mom's dad was Charlie Lamont Lemoyne Bowling, and his mom was Hannah Andrews Gideon built Bowling. And like I say, they were made way, she died in 1918, and so these were made probably in the late 1800s. That's about all I know about them. They aren't really well made. This one was never finished, or maybe it was finished and used, but it really never had a backing. It just had it sewn together. And
Grandma said they never finished the outsides of them back then.
Grandma said they never finished the outsides of them back then. So, which is very simple. It's the log cabin quilt. They're both log cabin quilts, just different sizes. That's what I know about them. They were from St. Clair area.
Were they stored? How were they stored? I'm not sure. Mom's always kept ours in pillowcases in the cedar chest. Is the way we've had these two, but I don't know where they were stored before that. I think that's it.
Thank you. If some of you need pillowcases for some of your quilts, there were quite a few pillowcases left over from the previous quilt turns that you're welcome to take to use for your quilts. As we get ready for the baby quilts, I want to tell you about the baby bed. It was donated to us by Linda Rizak Price. And what she wrote was the cream-colored wooden baby bed on metal wheels. We always put a description in the museum when we in our session book. Ora Otis Bud Wilson and Emma Bellows Wilson bought this crib for Bernice Wilson, born in 1905. It was used by her and then her children. And her children I don't think I brought the right list, but one of her children is here today. Reva Boswell, will you stand up, please? Reva Boswell. Where's she at? She's in the back. That was one of Matt and Bernice Rizak's children. There was Linda Price, who's her younger sister. Robert Rizak. Don Rizak. Rosie Clymer, Rizak Clymer, and
What was the other one's name?
Marjorie. So 7 kids. So 7 kids spent time in this baby bed. Now, I went on Find a Grave, and when Bernice passed away, and I forget when that was, 1960 or something like that. At that time, she would have had 22 grandchildren that could have spent time in this bed, and 41 great-grandchildren. Now, if we bring that on 40 more years, think of all the kids that could have bounced around in this baby bed from the family of Bernice and Matt Rizak. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background on the baby bed. Linda has donated that to the museum, and it will become part of our displays at the museum.
We figured we should hold these up too, so they can
Oh,
see
yeah.
better.
Grace. And Grace. Yeah.
Here, I'm going to hold up this one then too, because this is from my mother-in-law, Delta Martin. And Chad, is this your mom's? But when I was putting them up here, I'm like, look at the similarities here.
Yeah.
Even the pink background.
My mother and dad just had wedding anniversary the 23rd of this month. Had they been alive, it would have been 85 years. They was married in 1940. Mom wore out 2 Singer pedal sewing machines. She then got an electric one. She was a member of this needlecraft club south of town. So I can tell you, one was made in 1970, and then the other one was made in 77.
Did she have another one?
So
The green one.
that
This one?
No,
This one, or this one?
the one that she just had her hand on. This one.
Okay.
Yep.
yeah, there you go.
So
But
she-
anyway, She embroidered too, she did, and I can't say that the Needlecraft Club didn't do work on this one, either one of them, I don't know that. All I know is that nothing got thrown away. We have a quilt, the tie quilt, that has the backing of Purina feed sacks. So that tells you it's pretty frayed, but anyway, that's it about in a nutshell.
Thank you, Chet.
So yeah, so anyway, this was Delta Martin's, and hers says
You did?
1984 on it. And that was made for my oldest daughter. So, like I say, she didn't do a whole lot of the ones with embroidery, but that must have been a real thing for baby blankets. There she is.
Hi, I'm Elida Lobby. My mother-in-law is Joan Coulterman, and this is my baby blanket. So my great aunt Elida was an avid quilter and quilted hundreds of quilts in her lifespan. And when I was a baby, my mother got this box that said, "To Elida Marie from Elida Marie." And although she and my great-grandmother, her mother, also named Elida, we're a very, very German family. The other side of my heritage is Native American. I'm Cherokee, and my mother and father both had aspects of tribal members that run before the Trail of Tears and all of those things you hear about. So to nod to that, my very wonderfully German little fastidious great aunt sent me this. It's Indian girls, and each one of them have two braided pigtails, or two braids made out of yarn that she hand braided. It's all hand appliqué, hand quilted. She didn't usually adorn quilts with a lot of extras. So in talking with my cousin, her daughters, she actually practiced braiding teeny tiny braids on her daughter's hair before making the quilt so that she could get it just right and get it nice and tight. So my name is embroidered at the bottom as well, and there's in the blank squares, it's probably hard to see from the back, but there are teepees that are quilted in. And she kept very, very good records of every quilt she made and who they were made for and what they were inspired by. She got a lot of inspirations, just pictures out of books. And she noted that she got the idea for this pattern or this design out of a library book. I have since seen some very similar patterns. So it was a traditional quilting pattern for the Indian maidens. And she also noted in her records that she actually bought the cloth for this, and it cost her $8.72. Right. So, and just a little bit of a history about her, because she, unlike me, I'm from Oklahoma, but she spent the majority of her life in Kansas, in Wichita. She was a member of the Prairie Quilt Guild and had many quilts shown over the years, including as part of the, I think it was the Wichita Sedgwick Historical Museum, did a traveling quilt show for the 125th anniversary of Kansas statehood. And she had a quilt that traveled throughout the state in that, as well as had some state fair entry winners and was actually featured in several magazines that you probably all have picked up at some time. Quilting Today, Quiltworks, Quilter's Newsletter, and those type things. So it was an honor for me to have my very own Elida Worm quilt.
Did you have any of the others?
I do. I have a miniature fan and a couple of other big ones. And she also made my mother's baby quilt. And she was my grandfather's sister. And so we have lots of examples of her quilts.
Neat.
So, Grandma actually just made these, so Livona Biesenthal, Amber Magnet. Livona just made these in the last, I think 24 months. So the bright pink one is my Aunt Kayleen, is her granddaughter that was just born, be a year in this coming May. So that one was just completed here just like in the last 12 months or so. And then Grandma worked on this one as well. So they were hand embroidered, but they were machine quilted by Donna Goring. So both of those were done just recently. So again, Grandma's 92, so she just got those done. So.
I don't know how she can see to thread the needle.
She's actually working on another one that I've got a cousin that is having a baby. Having a baby here this spring as well. So she's actually working on another quilt at the moment as well. So.
We want to thank Amber for bringing her grandma up here today. So let's give Amber a round of applause.
This quilt was made by my grandmother for my daughter, Michelle. So we know that it was about 1968 that it was made. And everybody knows. Anyway, and my grandmother was like 81 when she made this, and I'm surprised she actually could do that because her hands were pretty crippled up by then. But she did. And how she knew I was having a girl, I don't know. But it worked.
It has incredible stitching around it has incredible embroidery stitching around the piecing.
Hello, I'm Phyllis Stolchek from Silver Lake. My sister and I came up today. This is another orphan. A friend of mine, Jane Elliott from Emmett, Kansas, she bought it at an estate sale with the intention of finishing it, and she never did. So she put in a box of stuff and donated it to the Delia thrift store. I'm in the Delia quilting group, and we were going through the box and said, well, look at this. And so it should have been hand-stitched, hand-quilted, but I didn't because I don't do that. I took it home and machine quilted it. At least it's out of the box. And there is...
on the sheep you did the...
I put swirlies on it to look like wool. I did use, it was pretty yellow and had mildewed spots. There's a product called Retro Clean, and that's what I used. It really took a lot of the yellow out. I'm not endorsing it. I mean, I guess I am, but I don't sell it. You can get it at quilt stores, and it really kind of brought it back to life. And I gave it back to Jane, and she's going to give it to, she's saving it for her granddaughter's child someday. So that's where that came from. What do you think the colors, is that from the 40s? We tried to guess. We have no idea who made it. The stitches are teeny tiny. I don't know. The other one, it was in a box of stuff. My sister, who passed away 3 years ago, it was in a box of her stuff. Again, it was put together, but I took it home and quilted it just to get it finished and get it out of the box. And I'll give it to somebody someday. I don't know who, but at least it's out of the box. It's very small, I know.
I can't see it, but there's a beautiful heart embroidered on there. Or not embroidered.
It's quilted.
Quilted on it. That one? Okay, we'll go with that one since that one's mine. This is the quilt I made for my youngest son. I made about 10 quilts for his older brother. but they were just embroidered quilts, whatever. This one has all the details of my youngest son. And my oldest son said, "How come you never made me a quilt?" So it's the Campbell's Kids. I embroidered it, and then I put all of our details of where we lived and stuff like that.
That's cool. Does he like it?
Do you know, he does, and amazingly, even I can't remember when my oldest son was born. I mean, the time and stuff. You ask anybody in our family, they know exactly when Wyatt was born.
That's because he's the favorite.
This is my baby quilt. And Marie Wagner, Marie Bossy Wagner, who was my grandmother, made this. And I always thought it was mine. But now that I'm looking at it, and it's blue, and I'm thinking either she wanted me to be a boy, or this was really my brother who is older than me. It's his baby quilt. I came afterwards, and another quilt didn't get made, so they just said, "Okay, this is yours." So I claim it, he doesn't know, so we're good. So it's either from the 40s or it's from the 50s, depending on which story you like. And now, after Jolene's presentation, because my grandmother is on that signature of that, I'm wondering if this was done at the needlepoint. So I want to go through those records and see if this was actually quilted at the Needlepoint Club.
Hi, I'm Dee Groff, and this is since I started quilting, I've made baby quilts for all the great nieces and nephews, and wedding quilts, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is going to the newest great nephew in February.
Barbara Crump? Barbara Crump? Oh, there she is.
I made this a few years ago, and my number 3 granddaughter said, "I want that quilt." So I told her, when she has a baby, you can have the quilt. They've been married 8 years, and I still have the quilt. And I've got another one. Which one? And this one, I saw a pattern of it, and I liked it so well, I drew the frog, and then I never did make it. But I finally dug it out, and I lost the book, so I forgot what it looked like. So this is just what I came up with. And we're having a new great nephew in March, so that's his.
Love those colors. Whoever in the bear, I think, goes with this one.
I'm Pat O'Grady, and I live in Manhattan. And I made this a few years ago. I had leftover material. Hold it closer. Oh, I had leftover material. But anyway, I quilted it and I pieced it on the machine. I quilted it with my embroidery machine. And then the leftover material became a teddy bear.
I'm Vern Stelter, I'm from Wheaton, and I think today I must be the definition of a thorn among roses. You and me. I've been quilting for all of about a year now. What's that?
You got one on it. He
Okay. This one here was just a pattern I found on the internet. It's a baby blanket, and I thought, you know, baby blankets spend a lot of time meshed up one side, the other side. So I said, why don't you make one with two fronts instead of the front and the back? So that's what I did with that, because I had a bunch of material left over and didn't know what to do with it. This one is quilted. I did not do the quilting. The quilting was done by a lady named Jeannie Merritt in Onaga. She has a long arm quilter, a long arm machine, and a tremendous talent. And so I turned this over to her, and she made it look as good as it is. This one is just a scrap quilt. I found a bunch of material laying around and put it together. The bindings on both of these, that one was pillowcased. This one is just, it was a binding of my own invention. And there was a fair amount of swearing went along with putting that together because it didn't follow any pattern, and I had to try to make it work somehow, and eventually I put enough thread on it, it did. This one is just a regular wraparound binding. I don't do hand binding because I don't have the dexterity or the talent or frankly the patience, I think, to do something like that. So this one I figured was the closest thing to a unisex I could come up with. If you got a boy, there's the blue. The front's probably more for a girl, so it's use it how you will. These are going to disappear. I've got a couple of granddaughters that have got their eyes on these, so I don't expect I'll have them around for very long. Thank you.
Let's give that thorn a round of applause. We sincerely appreciate you being part of our event today. That, I think, do you have another? Okay, one more.
So this is as close as I've come to making a quilt. This is my crazy quilt Althea, and I was fascinated with the pattern I saw in a magazine, and then I had to, it only had 3 blocks, and I didn't want any block to be the same, so I had to make up some of the pattern myself. And then I made up the edging, and that's it.
Thank you to all the quilters and all of the quilters. We'd like to get a picture of you before you leave. So after we get through with all the door prizes and everything, if all those of you that were quilters today would gather up here, we'll try to get a picture of all of us. If you notice on the wall over there, the quilt blocks were done by the junior high and the high school students. As I'm trying to put those together into a quilt, how many of you get done making a quilt and you have an extra block? Or 2 extra blocks, and you think, well, now I have to start another quilt. Well, I got all that done, and there's 1 extra block that didn't fit anywhere. So I do want to thank the high school art teacher, Becky Becker, for participating in this activity by involving her students. We have the icebreaker. I'll have Adley come up here.
I do want to say, I think it's special to have the tea. So today we only planned on 60 people. We had over 90 people, so we were a little over there. So we adapted to that. But I've got to know, who is the one lady out there that brought her own tea bag? I want to know what kind of tea it was.
Cranberry pomegranate, but it's decaf. I have to have.
Oh, she had to have decaf. Okay, and we didn't have that. Okay, I just thought that was the funniest thing. You brought your own tea to a tea party.
I think that, does any of the members of the committee have anything more to add?
Debbie puts this all together, and I think she deserves a huge round of applause. A lot of hours get put into this before it ever happens. When we come, and I've heard it said that, you know, sometimes we sound like little sheep. Debbie, 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 what do you do here? Well, we'll have to ask Debbie. Thank you, Debbie.
And for those of you that know me, I rarely end anything on time, let alone ahead of time. And we are just a few minutes ahead of time, which I think is okay. That gives you a little bit of time to socialize, and we do want to take the quilters, the picture of everybody that is wearing a quilt button up here. I want to thank, if you were part of the Historical Society to help set this up, please stand up. We walked in yesterday at 9 o'clock in the morning and it's empty. And by 1 o'clock we had it filled. I see that there's a few color catchers in an ice cream bucket up on the front table. Help yourself to those. And
Free will donations.
yes, we would like for the free will donation stuff to disappear.
And your stemware.
And your stemware to disappear. We have started a quilt turning kit that we're keeping things in. So I think with that, I want to share one more thing. I love this picture that showed up on Facebook. And it says, as you leave, when we engage in fiber arts, we are creating something, but we're also participating in historic traditions tens of thousands of years old. You are not only making art for your soul and for future generations, you are embodying the work of our ancestors, the woven road. With that, be careful going home, and we will see you next year the same weekend as long as the weather cooperates. It cooperated well today. So, quilters, if you will come